It is continuing to increase, and most importantly, this problem is not concentrated in the inner city. It's not concentrated in our suburb. It's concentrated everywhere. It's not suburbia, it's everywhere. As you will know, when you have seen a lot of newspaper articles around here, we've had a huge problem in the Topton area. Topton, beautiful rural area of our county, and they have been inundated with heroin problems. So we want to give you a little bit of background of this problem, and you know, I'm going to turn most of this over to Detective Leparacci, who's working on the street each and every day to arrest the people who are supplying our kids, our grandkids with heroin, and they're ending up dead. I've said a long time ago we can't arrest ourselves out of this problem. This is a problem where we could build 100 million jails and spend all your money, and that would just be flushing it down the toilet. We can't arrest our way out of this problem. We got to have a three-pronged approach: education and prevention, treatment and enforcement. We have to continue to enforcement. We got to arrest the dealers, but the people who are just using, they need treatment, and we need to educate them to prevent them from using heroin, opiates, or any of those other drugs. So I will now turn this over to Detective Leparacci of our District Attorney's Detective Unit, and just a renowned drug cop in our county. Pat was with Reading Police for many years. He was also with the DEA and has been with my office for about the past 8 years. So, Pat Leparacci.
Good evening. First, we appreciate the offer to be considered to be speakers to this organization. And when John asked me to speak here, I obviously said yes, because he's my boss, and then upset. But the one thing, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I've been a cop for 25 years. I started out in the streets of Philadelphia. 1994, I came to the streets of Reading. I was a street cop for 5 years. Then I was chosen to go to the Drug Enforcement Administration. It was supposed to be a one-year assignment. That one-year assignment spanned 5 years. I investigated drug dealers on a national and international level, did undercover work, you name it. And then, one day, I get hired by John Adams, and I'm currently in charge of the Berks County Drug Task Force. And I remember the day when we were in a press conference, and my boss said, "We can't arrest ourselves out of this." I'm like, what did you just say? And I didn't want to, come out and say anything, because we're in a public setting. I'm like, what the hell did he just say? You can't arrest ourselves. He just, he's a bunch of guys up front here. That's exactly what we've been trying to do our whole careers, arrest ourselves out of this. And then that night I went home and I sat back and I thought about it. And he's damn right. You know what? Because the problem just keeps getting worse, it seems like. No matter how many people we arrest, it just keeps getting worse. And one thing I just want to spell, just to get a clarifier here. We do not engage in a war on drugs on users, okay? What we do is we try to target violent offenders, those gun-toting drug dealers. That's our #1 target. And then criminal organizations. That's what our office does. We look at the big picture, we take out the big dealers.
In the criminal justice system, the people are represented by two separate and equally important groups: the police who investigate crime and the district attorneys who prosecute the offenders. These are their stories.
Who recognizes him? Most people do. I can tell you, when I started doing this presentation, most people did not recognize him, but as time has gone on, most people recognize him. I apologize, this isn't behaving as it should.
Doubled in 5 years. 700,000 people needing help tonight. And everyone who loved Philip Seymour Hoffman is looking back at the recent pictures of him for clues for the warning signs. And you know if it was someone you loved. ABC's Cecilia Vega now with a very personal story reaching across so many lives.
It all seems so normal. The last day of Philip Seymour Hoffman's life, coffee in his New York neighborhood, dinner with friends. But it would be his last because of the unrelenting pull in that demonic drug, heroin.
I did everything I could.
Those who tried it say depression, anger, sadness, all gone in heroin's intense euphoria. Actor Russell Brand described it like this. It transforms a tight white fist into a gentle brown wave. The rush hits within seconds. After just 30 minutes, heroin can knock you out cold.
There's a tendency to be just kind of going to sleep in the middle of a sentence.
The high wears off after a few hours.
You can be a functioning heroin addict. We see it all the time.
To spot a hidden user, there are clues. Those heart-stopping 3 Ps of heroin. Paraphernalia, look for spoons, needles, foil. Personality changes, like increased irritability, theft, and physical effects, track marks, small pupils. I know those signs. My father was a heroin addict. You see, this is where the story gets personal. I want to tell you about this man, my dad, Raul. Those good looks, that smile, he could have been whatever he wanted to be. Instead, he shot up.
He was a heroin addict before I was born. He was a heroin addict when I was a child, and ultimately it got the best of him.
I knew when he was high. I could see the track marks, too.
I think my father's drug addiction has really made me who I am today. You try to be everything that person couldn't be. He never got to see what became of me and my brother, and I think he would be really proud to see us now.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, the new face of this formidable enemy, also leaving behind family, children, and friends to greet heroin's suffocating grip.
And Cecilia is here now. I know it's tough to talk about something so close to your life.
Yeah, it's strange to see my father on TV, but you know what, Diane, I'm really glad to share this story because I know that it's so many families just like mine out there, supportive, loving families that learn to live and cope with addiction in our lives.
You know barriers have only increased these numbers.
You know, you mentioned the number of heroin users. The number of heroin-related deaths are up to 27,000 people killed because of heroin over the last 10 years. And it's not just that, the power of this drug, we said it in the story, is gripping. You can try it, doctors tell us, and 2 weeks later can become hooked after that first time using it.
Well, thank you again, Cecilia, for this really important report.
So I showed that video. It's kind of a lengthy video, but I think it's very well done for a few different reasons. Number one, because of Philip Seymour Hoffman. Here we have an example of an individual that has attained what most people think that is in life, very successful individual. Fame, wealth, family, and guess what? He gave it all up for that addiction. He's chasing that addiction, and he finally succumbed to that addiction by overdosing. Also, I tend to speak to a lot of teenagers, and I think that message where Cecilia Vega talks about her own family, specifically her father being an addict, I think that sends a pretty good, strong message that although an individual in your family, whether a sibling, a parent, is an addict, that does not put a stigma on you because she's overcome that, has become a very successful ABC News reporter. I'm just going to stand over here for a while. So this article was written, showed up in the newspaper on WFMZ, actually on TV, on January 20th, 2014. And I use it because it sends a very powerful message here, and I think it sums it up real well. It says, Reading, Pennsylvania, heroin will steal your soul. It's the first thing addicts think about when they wake up. It's the last thing they remember before they pass out. Heroin is a demon of a drug with a growing demand that leads many people down a tragic path and ends many promising young lives. It's an alarming trend infecting the entire country, including Berks County. Heroin is probably one of the most potent drugs that I've ever encountered through my career on how it affects people, so Liberace. Heroin is hijacking the lives of teenagers, young adults, middle-aged professionals, and even the elderly. It's an equal opportunity destroyer that tears families apart. Unfortunately, here in Berks County, it's fairly easy to obtain. So does anyone recognize that? No? I hope not, because that is what heroin looked like back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. See, back then, not many people know, it was actually sold by Sears Roebuck Company. And it was sold, you could buy it right out of the catalog. It was sold back then and marketed as a cough suppressant. But what's important to know is that back then, the cough suppressant heroin was only 2 to 5% pure heroin. The rest was filler. And we'll learn why that's important here shortly. But society later learned about the negative health effects of heroin, and in 1914, distribution of heroin was controlled by the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act. 1924, Congress banned it, the importation, distribution, and sale and manufacturing, and then finally in 1970, Congress made heroin illegal and labeled it a controlled one substance. And I can tell you that 1970 law is still on the books, and that's what we use every day. As a matter of fact, this is why I'm dressed the way I am today. I'm not in a suit, because we are actually arrested people this morning in the city of Reading. We're kicking in doors, arresting a pretty violent drug dealer. That 1970 law is what allows us to operate. And a Schedule I drug, what that means is it has no legitimate use. There's no medicinal purpose for it whatsoever. So, I can tell you, it's more plentiful than it's ever been here in Berks County and throughout the country. It's cheaper than it's ever been. The Mexican cartels are flooding our markets with heroin. Cocaine is not as abundant as it used to be. And the price of heroin over the past 5 years has been slashed more than half, while the price of cocaine has doubled. It's more potent than it's ever been. And I can tell you, when we seize drugs in Berks County, we send them to the lab and they tell us the purity of it. So currently, the purity average is 64%, but it can fluctuate between 36 and 87% pure. And so that's important to know, because why do you think that's important for us to know that? Exactly. So I had the opportunity to work undercover work, and I purchased heroin many, many times as an undercover officer, portraying myself either as a user or a mid-level dealer or a supplier. And I can tell you, it doesn't come with the labels. As a matter of fact, some of the people I dealt with, although they were intelligent people, they were street smart, they were not educated. So when a user goes to buy heroin, it doesn't tell you what the purity is. And just as important, it doesn't even tell you what's in it. You're taking a gamble that there's actually heroin in it, let alone the purity of it. So one day you go to your neighborhood dealer and he gives you 36% pure, and the next day you go to 87, what do you think is going to happen? Exactly. Not a good day. Higher profit margins than ever, and sustainable. What do I mean by sustainable? What I mean by sustainable is this. Again, many of these drug dealers that we deal with are not educated, but they're not dumb. They know that once they have an addict hooked on their product, that addict is going to be there day in, day out. They don't care how they make that money, whether it's stealing from a family member, breaking into cars, committing burglaries, whatever. They know that that addict's going to be there day in and day out. And there's increased demand for it for various reasons I wouldn't touch in, and the senator touched in it as well. Does anyone recognize that? Believe it or not, that's what we call eggs or fingers of heroin. And that top left picture is, they're about 10 grams each, And what they basically look like is a finger of heroin, but it's wrapped in latex. Anyone want to guess why that's wrapped in latex? Swallowed, right? Body carry. So they pay individuals to fly to other countries, and then you fly back in on body carry. And the bottom right picture, I like showing this picture because I never forget this seizure right here. It occurred in 500 block of Walnut Street in the city of Reading. We kicked in the door, and we had our canine dog ready to come sniff after we, to come find these drugs. But I can tell you, we didn't need that canine dog because, for lack of a better word, that guy just pooped them out. We knew exactly, just follow the smell. That's exactly what they did. They just secreted them in their body, flew into JFK, was driven to right here in Reading, Pennsylvania, 500 block of Walnut Street. Anyone recognize that? That's a Jeep Grand Cherokee, right? Who has a Jeep Grand Cherokee?
That's under the back seat.
This is Detective Uparachi from Berks County District Attorney's Office. This is a black 2006 Jeep Grand Cherokee, which was seized relative to a search warrant, and we located a secret compartment within the back end of the Jeep. The compartment is operated electronically. We couldn't figure out the sequence, but we found the non-factory wires underneath the rug, cut the wires, and connected a power source to engage the truck.
That is not a factory option.
As you can see, the truck is large enough to hold a lot of contraband. And reverse polarity to close the compartment.
So, truth be told, that's a crappy video. I'm stumbling all over my words, camera's shaking, right? The reason that is, this video was never meant for this audience. This was meant for in-house training, because this car has been up and down our highways, it had tickets, it's been pulled over, and I forget how many, it was 100-some thousand miles, it's a newer Jeep. That's all this car was used for, is trafficking drugs up and down our highways. That is a very good compartment, it's very difficult to find, and when my boss, John Adams, found out about it, he said, why are we not showing this to people to show what we're up against? This is one car that we haven't seen, and I forget what was in it. It was a lot of drugs, a lot of money. That's what we're up against. So that's what heroin looks like. Top left is a packet of heroin that sells for $10. It has about 300 of a gram of heroin in it. And if you take a dollar bill and you put it on a digital scale that weighs a gram, our US currency actually weighs 1 gram, okay? So if you cut that down into 100 pieces, take 3 of those out, that's what it weighs. That's how minute it is, and it'll cost you $10. I don't know what happened to those pictures. Bottom left are bundles of heroin. That's how they're sold in Reading, or throughout Berks County, I should say. We're buying drugs almost in every corner of Berks County, unfortunately. But they cost, if you buy an entire 10, it can range from anywhere from $40 to $100, depending on where you buy it. What's behind all this? I can tell you Mexican drug cartels. I know that for a few different reasons. Number one is, I would say about 10 years ago, it would be unheard of for us here in Berks County to be locking up members of Mexican drug cartels. I can tell you that has changed. I don't want to say constantly arrest or deal with members of